Okay, the internal view of the temporal, the petrous part of the temporal bone, it says what structures are housed within this part of the temporal. It houses the middle and inner ear cavities. That would be here. I kind of outlined it. The internal acoustic meatus, what passes through this opening, it's hard to see, but there's these little indents here. That would be that area. The vestibulocochlear passes through there. That's the 8th cranial nerve. Then the internal view of the sphenoid. So this would be the lesser wing. The greater would be here, this part. Let's see. The optic canal would be these little indents there. Cranial nerves run through there, 3, 4, and 6 in the lacrimal nerve. Then you have the sella turcica. What structure sits in that little fossa? That would be the pituitary gland. That would just be right here, this little indent. Okay, next. Now with the ethmoid, the crista galli, that helps secure the brain to the cranial cavity with dura mater. That would be this little bone here I circled. The cribriform plate, so that's to the side of that little pointy bone there. What passes through there, those holes would be the first cranial nerves. Okay, let me put the head back on and then I can do these sutures this way. Okay, so you have 4 sutures, the coronal, sagittal, lambdoid, and the squamous. Coronal would be this frontal here. So this is your coronal suture. It separates frontal and parietal. Then you have your sagittal, and it separates the parietal bones. Then you have the lambdoid suture that separates the parietal and the occipital. Then you have the squamous, and that would be this one that separates the temporal and the parietal. Now you have the facial. Okay. Top of the jawline. Okay, then you have the maxilla. Oh, my paper's that would be this area right here, and the alveolar process would be right above the teeth here. Then you have the nasal. Okay, then you have the zygomatic. The zygomatic would be these 2 bones right here. It says, what 2 bones form the zygomatic arch? It would be the temporal and the zygomatic bone. Where they meet, that would be the arch. Then you have the ethmoid bone. I kind of have it, that circle that's inside of the orbital area. The vomer, what 2 bones from the bony nasal septum? What 2 bones form that bony nasal septum? That would be the vomer. The vomer and the ethnoid, so that would be inside there. I drew a dark line there. Let's see, the inferior nasal concha, what does this do? This helps filter air while breathing. That would be inner and to the side. It's not labeled, but it's hard to label that inner part. Then you have the mandible, which would be the bottom jaw here. This would be the body of the mandible. The ramus would be here on the side. The angle would be the corner right here. The mandibular condyle, this forms the temporomandibular joint. It articulates with the temporal bone. That would be right here, this part. Oops. Then what else? The notch would be here, this part. And the coronoid process would be this right here, this part. Okay. Now we're going to do the vertebral column. So it says to point out the 4 curves of the adult vertebral column, and which 2 are primary. The 2 that are primary would be the thoracic. I drew lines from here to here. So the thoracic vertebral and the sacral, that would be the most, the 2 primary. That would be this area and then these. Cervical vertebrae, it says state how many. The atlas bone would be this top one. Below would be the axis. But C1 through 7 would be the cervical. The atlas is, what it articulates with would be the occipital bone, right here. And then, oh, I have to demonstrate the axis right here, pointing at me. And the atlas and occipital bone gives us the ability to nod our head. Okay, like kind of what he's doing. Then let's see. It says, what is unique about the transverse process of all cervical vertebrae compared to those of the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae? It provides the attachments for muscles. That would be what is unique about it. The thoracic, let's see, the thoracic vertebrae now is after this dark line here, because this would be the top cervical, so it'd be 12 right here, 1 through 12. That would be the thoracic. The spinous process would be these sticking out here in the back. Transverse would be the ones on the side sticking out right here. The intervertebral foramen, that would be here inside, and that's where the spinal cord would pass through. Then the body would be these thick parts here would be the body. And then the position of the intervertebral disc would be these lines in between. That's where you would see the disc. Now the lumbar would be here. I drew the lines. Okay, that would be 5 down. Okay, there's 5 of them. Then you have the sacrum. Those are 5 vertebrae fused together. Then this little tip I colored black there would be the coccyx. Then you have the sternum. Sternum would be right here. This little square that I have crossed pattern would be the manubrium. So the manubrium is this area. The body is this tie-like part. The xiphoid process is the tip of the sternum, and the jugular notch would be right here, this top part. Okay, now we have our ribs. It says to point out the true ribs. The true ribs would be this one starting down to about right here where I drew this line. They're true ribs because they're actually attached to the sternum. Then the false ribs would be these 3 down because it's attached to the true ribs, not to the actual sternum. Then you have the floating ribs, and that would be these right here. That'd be the floating ribs. Next, it says point out the head, neck, and tubercle of a rib, and explain how the ribs articulate with the vertebrae. So you'd have to go in here. So right here would be the head. The neck would be considered here, and there would be like another notch here. That would be the tubercle of the rib, and it's attached. It articulates with the thoracic vertebrae here. Next would be, I think I'm done with this one. Okay, so I'm done with the axial part, so I'll move on to the appendicular. We'll make another video. Okay, stop that one, and then we'll make another one.